This is TPG Live, and I'm Jeremy Horn, also known as the Product Guy, and we're about to begin. This is your stage, no matter where you are in your product journey, from startups to Fortune 500s, interns to CEOs. We're a global community that values every voice. TPG Live is a show where everyone, both on and off camera, is encouraged to join in and shape the conversation with your insights, your questions, your topics. Just hop into the chat room and I will strive to include as many of your comments as possible within the broader conversation in real time. Today, the on-camera portion of our roundtable is joined by Artie Iyengar, a recognized product management leader with over 20 years of experience driving product strategy, execution, and go-to-market. From early stage to mature products, from enterprise to telecom market segments, she's worked at Ericsson, F5, Palo Alto Networks, and HashiCorp, and can now be found as Senior Director at Veza, an identity security company. We're also joined by Tom O'Rourke, co-host of the Enterprise Automation Excellence podcast and graduate of Polytechnic University here in New York, where 20 plus years of enterprise software product leadership and a focus on mission critical products across everything from automation to infrastructure management. He's held roles at Continuity, iTrax, and UBS, where he's led multiple M&A product and technology integration initiatives. Tom can now be found as Managing Director of Product and Programs at Tidal Software. Today on TPG Live, we'll be discussing moving beyond the individual contributor into leadership positions and establishing a sustainable product function wherever you may work. Ask yourself, what are those key skills needed to make the leap into product leadership? How can you overcome pushback in establishing crucial product management capabilities? Join us in the chat room and at the roundtable as we discuss all this and much more. Coming up next on TPG Live, your go-to platform for all things product management, connecting you with industry leaders, trendsetters, and a global community of insights and unique perspectives. This is the Product Way. Hello. Hey, everyone. Artie, Tom, did I leave anything out today?
No, you didn't. You did a great job of introducing me. I'll let Tom speak for himself.
Yeah, no, both Artie and I have been around for a while, and either we could spend the next 90 minutes dissecting all the things that come out of it, or we can let you run through it in 15 or 20 seconds. I do, however, have to note that I've actually left Tidal. Tidal was acquired by Redwood, and I'm now doing some consulting in addition to the co-hosting, and I've got some other stuff coming in 2025 when my gardening leave finishes. Gotcha.
So this brings us to our question of the show. And so for our question of the show tonight, what's one trend in product management you think is underrated? So we're going to go around the room here, but also for those of you joining us live, welcome, hello, and also everyone in the audience, or as I call them, the off-screen part of the roundtable. What's one trend in product management you think is underrated? Artie, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. If I think back when I started my product management journey, I think roadmap planning, prioritization was very heavily deliverables focused, task oriented. And I think a big underrated trend, which has picked up in a big way, is making your roadmap outcome focused. And when you make it outcome focused, what you're doing is you're immediately bringing an outside in focus to your roadmap. When you're thinking about the things you want to do, you start uplifting yourself right from that thinking. You are now able to think about the metrics that are meaningful, the things that you are building. Are they aligned with what your customers need? User experience, building that minimum lovable product, not necessarily the minimum viable product, and really building that agility to achieve those outcomes. So I think outcome-focused roadmap planning prioritization is a very underrated trend.
Excellent, excellent. Tom?
You know, I think I agree totally with Artie about outcome focus. I think you can frame that in a number of ways, but it is fundamentally about being able to, align with what the customer needs and what the business needs from you, rather than the really cool and exciting stuff, which is all technical, but is not necessarily getting you to a place that is going to produce, better results for the customer, better outcomes for the business. If I step back, though, I think that, to me, I wouldn't call it underrated, but I think we have to recognize that product management as a discipline is still very, very young. In many ways, the paint hasn't dried yet. And, if I look back across, even the last 5 years, there has been, a rapid evolution in the frameworks for thinking about how to go and make decisions and what what the purpose of those decisions are. And I don't see anything as we come to the end of 2024 that tells me we're going to get it all right in 2025, and going into 2026, it's going to be a science and not an art.
So the trend. So the trend is
the
lack of a framework.
Yeah, so to me, I would I would take your word trend and I would shift it around to recognize that the flow and the evolution of product management is continuing. That we are not yet at the point that we are on a foundation that's going to sit there for 100 years.
All right. So we'll talk, and next, which also kind of brings me to next month. Anyone who's joining us will be talking about the future of product management. So that should definitely continue with a lot of the themes that Tom just mentioned here. For myself, continuous discovery practices is what I consider to be a very underrated trend in product management. I'm a big fan of dual track that kind of helps you do that continuous discovery even more, assuming you have the resources for it, but constantly building into your product process, not a design sprint every once in a while, but where if something's always happening in parallel or at a really good cadence, where you're always talking to customers, you're always making sure you're learning something new, and you're really working to just be dynamic and flexible and adapt as you learn something, and actually being lowercase agile as opposed to that other one. So that's what I would say. The continuous discovery practices would be what I would point to as what I think for the a very underrated theme. And Artie, the one that you picked was my backup. So I had outcome-based roadmaps was the other trend. So very cool, very cool. So that brings us to our first topic of the show today. And so our first topic, we're going to be getting into what it's like to go from an IC role, an individual contributor role, into leadership, into product leadership. A lot of us make that jump. Some prefer to stay as an IC. Other folks want to move into product leadership. And I think one thing that everyone hears is, wow, those are completely different skill sets. But a lot of people want to do that and hope to be on that trajectory. And so I think a great way to kind of start this out is and I'm going to start with you, Artie. What specific skills did you focus on building during your transition into leadership? How did you go about developing those skills?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think one that I'm still learning along the journey, I would say. But when I first started the transition, somebody told me one of the biggest skills you need to train yourself for is the art of letting go. I think that's extremely true. As an IC, you own your turf, right? And it's a turf with a boundary, right? When you're transitioning to a leadership role, which may or may not be people leadership, right? Maybe you have a team of people you're managing, or maybe you've transitioned into a leadership role that encompasses a broader charter, a broader scope. You cannot now um, be functioning with the possessiveness of a boundary. You have to be able to look broader, bigger, which means you have to be able to trust, you have to be able to delegate, you have to be able to let people, perhaps in your team or in stakeholder teams, drive the things in order to achieve those outcomes, right? The bigger picture blocks that you're laying. Um, so for me, really, the biggest thing was that letting go, because all through when you start your career as an IC, you are all about, I need to achieve what I have been told to do, and I know to do that best. So it's really hard to tell yourself, I need to empower, I need to enable and trust that things will happen, right? So that to me was a big learning, and something I would say I'm still learning even as of today.
How do you trust to delegate? How do you get comfortable with delegating, and how do you build up that trust? I assume it's more than just telling the team to gather around and start doing trust falls with each other.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that it's a learning journey, right? As you work with people, you figure out skill sets of people. You figure out that there are strong points, there are weak points, and to slowly start, training yourself to identify what kinds of things people are really good at. In the end, to me, in the end, uh, getting an outcome is all about motivating people in the right way, right? To enable them to do the best with the things that they are best at doing. So as you identify the strong points, as you're able to work with people on how to overcome perhaps weak points, you are able to start building that trust. And trust is reciprocal, right? It's not one way. You show the trust and you start seeing that being reciprocated as well. And I think it's a journey, but that's kind of how um, you know I've done it in the last few years that I've transitioned into a leadership role.
So to paraphrase, if I'm following correct, so it was really about for you to kind of get better at delegating and developing trust. It was really about getting to know your team, getting their strengths, their weaknesses. Was there anything that you did um, prior to being in that leadership role to kind of develop those skills prior to that transition when you were going from an IC type of role to a leadership role? Was there something that you were doing to kind of develop that skill set?
Um, I think not particularly, I would say, but the one thing that I've always tuned myself to do well is building interpersonal relationships. And that helps me kind of identify, even through, and I might be interacting with people in a peer capacity, right? Um, it helps me identify what areas, what domains, somebody is really strong at, or even soft skills that people really like and gravitate towards, or gravitate away from, right? And that that acumen, I think, helped me as I transitioned into the leadership role to be able to then identify the right candidates for task delegation, right? And I call it task, it sounds trivial. But what I mean is, you want to have the right person take that baton, right, in order to be able to achieve the goals that you are laying out.
Tom, to you, what skills prior to kind of being in a leadership position did you work to develop? How did you develop those skills?
So, I need to put, the disclaimer up front that I climbed the leadership ladder before I got into product. So
that's one way to do it.
Well, product management didn't really exist at the point that I got into technology management. There were system analysts and business analysts, and there are various other roles out there. But at that stage, you still had to figure out what the customer wanted and go and get to a product. But there really weren't roles in the organization that I worked that would be called product. So this part of the discussion is around leadership, and I think Artie makes a number of very good points that around recognizing that you've stepped into a new role, and that you need to be able to leave the responsibilities behind with that. I think that it doesn't matter whether you're in product or development management, which was what I was doing at the time. While to some degree, you do get extra points going back and talking to developers and being able to help them solve their problems. You weren't promoted to be a development manager simply because you could talk to developers and you could help them solve your problems. You have you have a whole range of new areas that you're going to need to go and bring into what you're doing. There's off the top of my head, there are project management elements of a manager's role. There are people management, financial management, diplomacy and politics. Because when I did this, I was in a very, very large organization, and politics is not a negative word. And I'm saying this on the Thursday after Election Day in the United States. At a basic level, it's how we interact with one another. And all of these elements, and there are a bunch of other ones, are things that are going to you're going to be confronted with along the way. Depending on the timing that you're promoted, you may arrive, to discover that, you've got 36 hours to put together your budget for next year. Or, you've risen out of the team that you were in, but you now have a personnel issue because there's somebody else who feels that they deserve the job, and your problem to find a solution for. In all of this, you have moved out of the single contributor role. If you can think about it, in the single contributor role, you're kind of climbing up a ladder, and you get to the management point, and you now have to take a much broader view. It's almost like a T shape. And that's first level management, and to Artie's comment about she still feels like this is going on. Well, of course it is. As you climb up the leadership ladder, at each level, the range of items that you are now going to need to be familiar with, need to go and contribute to, need to own in this is going to climb its way up all the way up until you're chief product officer. So it is an ongoing exercise, and it doesn't get any easier. On the other hand, you can be confident that you're not going to run out of new things to go and learn.
Good points. Very good points. We have a question from the audience. They were asking. It's I'd say adjacent to our topic, so I figured we can touch on it. This is from Dina, and she's asking, how has the IC product role evolved with AI tools at today's disposal? Artie, jump to you.
Yeah, I think
because we have to have an AI question.
Right, that's right. And my initials are AI. So I think there definitely are, quite a few tools that um, product managers seek to use. They're primarily, um, in the category of summarization, analysis, and things like that. And I think what it allows you to do is really cut down on that initial um, time that you had to spend to do all of that yourself. Um, I do want to caution, though, is that given the state of the AI tools, um, and given the fact that I think this is still fairly premature, that you can't eliminate that human in the loop entirely, uh, it only means that you've cut out a little bit of that time. The ICPM still needs to be doing, say, vetting of the output that the AI tool is giving, right? So, you know, instead of starting on a blank paper, I'm able to start, let's say, with the output of ChatGPT as an example, right? However, soon you'll realize that that output isn't something I can readily rely on, right? For various reasons. I mean, if it's something I have to summarize for a customer, I have to add a lot of context. I have to add a lot of detail there. I may need to make sure that I align on the factual accuracy of the things. So there's so many things that you still have to do. So to answer the question, my point is that yes, there are tools. Yes, a lot of that can be leveraged to, for instance, easily analyze, get insights, summarize, but it doesn't take away the bulk of the things that you still have to do and put yourself in the loop of maintaining the factuality of the content. And I honestly think that, so while there is a simplification, there is that due diligence that you still have to do. The simplification gives you the time to perhaps do a lot more, maybe not a lot more, but definitely a little more than you would have with no simplification at all. So there is a benefit, but I don't want us to walk away from here thinking that life has now become super simple. No, it hasn't. You cannot eliminate yourself from that loop, and that's extremely important to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, I think you hit a lot of the key points right there. For everyone everyone else, if you're joining us through YouTube, you're joining us through LinkedIn or elsewhere, I wonder where the elsewhere might be, or elsewhere. Post your comments, send in more questions, and we'll keep working them into the conversation, the roundtable conversation that we are having here, and seeing a lot of interesting stuff getting posted. Someone mentioned a thing called Chat PRD. That sounds scary. A little bit scary there. Curious to try it though. Tom, did you experience when you transitioned into a leadership role? Did you experience self-doubt during that transition to leadership? And if so, how did you overcome it and build confidence in your new role?
Yeah, the answer was no. For me, the first move into leadership, felt very natural, and I had a lot of support from the peers, or former peers that I had worked with. I had support from my manager in doing this. So that it wasn't there the first time. I think as I've continued along the way, it is very reasonable to hit the end of a long rough day and step back and wonder do I really want to be doing this? Am I the right person to be doing this? And that reflection is actually very, very healthy. If you offer an analog in it, if our bodies didn't feel pain, we wouldn't know when we needed to make adjustments. We needed to change course. We needed to do something different. I managed to burn myself on the stove last night, and the only reason that it's a
I'm
small,
sorry to hear that.
well, no, it's a, I was working quickly. I was doing things I'd done before, but I wasn't, in the moment and concentrating enough on it. But, the first touch of my arm on the side of the pot was enough for me to pull my arm away and not leave it there. And so, having doubt, is part of being self-aware. I think it's ultimately very, very healthy. It works best when you have a network of peers, or you have a mentor or somebody else that you can go and you can take this back to, even if they're outside of the product management field. I was talking with someone last week, and he reminded me, you can always call a friend. They may not understand anything at all about the technical problem or the people problem that you're trying to deal with, but just being able to explain it to them, and having somebody willing to listen, that's going to be a help, and is going to move you back into the path of, okay, this was not a great Thursday, but I'm going to bounce back from it tomorrow, Friday.
Artie, what advice do you have for people who might be experiencing self-doubt, and what they could do to kind of help build their confidence up?
Yeah. I'll tell you based on my experience. I experience self-doubt, a lot of times in a lot of things I do, even if that may not be the first instance of my doing that thing. I think it's very healthy, as Tom said. But I think the more important thing that I've learned along the way, through repeated experiences of self doubt, is that you're not alone. You're not the only one feeling that self doubt. It's very likely that there are many others in the room feeling very similarly, right? And that has, I think I've learned to use that or channelize that in a positive way. Meaning, there was a time for, in a large room of people, I would hesitate to raise my hand and ask that, let's say, so called dumb question. Now I don't, because I know the minute my mind tells me it's a dumb question, I tell myself, you know what? If you have the question, guarantee there are many others there who have the same question, but who will not raise their hands and ask. And so I'm okay to put myself out there and say, I have a question. And sometimes maybe it truly is a little dumb, but often it truly isn't. And people come back and say, hey, thanks for asking that question. We had exactly the same question in our head. So I think it's important to know that you're not alone. You're not alone. So just, it's okay to have some anxiety. It's that positive anxiety that drives you to doing more due diligence and doing putting your best foot forward. And that's kind of how I've slowly started trying to morph that self-doubt.
Tom, when you get into that new leadership, position, what advice do you have for people in building, kind of establishing their credibility as a leader? What sort of actions or behaviors help you gain trust quickly?
Yeah, I think in general, as a leader, the spending spending some time understanding the situation. Every time that I've gone into a new leadership role, this situation has been unique, and so you need to move quickly to make sure that you pull together from the stakeholders, the other people who work there, some cases customers, to have a sense of do you understand 80 to 90% of what is going on. And part of doing that is having the ability to listen and not just immediately, start to go and hey, it's the afternoon of day one, the ink is dry on all the human resources paperwork. Let me start telling everybody what to go and do. If there's not a crisis, the standard leadership model of you take 100 days when you go into a new role. You spend 30 days listening. You spend the next 30 making small changes and getting feedback about that, and only then do you start to make larger changes. That's fantastic. I'd say that probably happened about half the time. And the other half the time, they said leader, but they were really looking for somebody else to, go and drag a hose into the burning building because it was on fire. And then, there were things that had to be solved before the end of the first day.
Yep, one of my last large roles was the day they closed schools in New York City because of the pandemic. So I can kind of relate to that. Artie, what are some advice, some tips that you have for earning credibility as a leader?
Yeah, I think as Tom said, it really depends on the environment, the organization, and really the need of that hour. In the end, I think it is about meeting what the need of that hour is, right? As a leader, I mean, sometimes it is rolling up your sleeve and taking that ownership. Sometimes you have the luxury to do the listen and then incrementally make change. But I think a big part of earning that credibility and the trust, not just of perhaps your own team, but also your stakeholders, is really you know showing that you're able to do the things that are having a meaningful impact, right? Doesn't need to be huge, but at least incrementally in the right direction, meaningful impact. And I, in fact, am an advocate of you don't want to make a huge change day one. Even if that's going to be a huge impact, it's probably going to be a huge disruption as well, and you're definitely not going to earn the goodwill. So I think it's about really figuring out what the tea leaves are, figuring out what the need of that hour is, and then rolling up your sleeves and acting accordingly. That, I think, really helps earn the right kind of credibility with either your own team, your management, your peer stakeholders, because you are contributing to where that contribution is really needed, right? Where that gap exists.
I would add on, I think the other element which runs through what both Artie and I said is, but we're probably, not emphasizing enough, is communication. That, all of this works really, really well. If you're communicating with, the people who hired you, with the people who are now working for you, the stakeholders, everybody who is now depending on you being successful in this job. Communicate. Don't go off on building that 100-day plan and not make anyone aware of what you're doing in all of this. Or if you're going into because you've got to fight a fire, and it's the worst case where you are going to have to make difficult and hard decisions very, very quickly, then you need to be transparent about that up front. This is not the way I would prefer to do it, but this is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm going to go and do it. There isn't time to go and all do a week long offsite and make decisions on this. They hired me, or they hired you into a role where they're expecting you to go and solve the problem, get things done.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, I think often leaders need to make tough decisions, and you may not have too much of a runway, right, to make that. being able to um, formulate how you arrived at that decision, having your point of view, and having the vulnerability to lean on your team to get the various points of context is supremely important, because you're too new there. You don't have all the context. But building that context and having your point of view to say what led to you making that decision, I think goes a long way.
Tom, when you did make that transition in a role from an IC to a leadership role, what was, I guess, what was the most surprising change that you experienced when making that transition?
I think, you know, um, the in this particular case, it was, you know, I had I had no idea at all how many meetings the prior manager in that role was spending their time in. I had presumed that, they were just absent from their office like 8 out of 10 hours every day.
Hiding in a corner somewhere.
And this goes back to how some organizations get things done. It wasn't visible to me that, as a sole contributor, that the way to get things done in the organization was by meeting with people. Now, they had too many meetings and the meetings were inefficient, but it was how they moved forward. And I was just completely blind to that, when I arrived that first Monday morning.
Artie, same question for you. What was your surprise?
Yeah, I'd say definitely on the same lines. Um, the number of one-on-ones, whether with my own team, my stakeholders, or adjacent organization members that I and ended up having, would easily fill my calendar and few days in my calendar. And I would often, at least in the initial time of that transition, I'd often end the week wondering, did I really do any work at all? Like, or was I just in one-on-one meetings? And then slowly I started learning to become more efficient about those. So are those important? Sure, they are, because that helps you build that alignment, that context, um, and to understand what's happening, for you to be able to connect the dots even to your own team, right? For example. But I started becoming more efficient about how I did those things. And then I also started becoming efficient about which of those are must do's, like must happen every week, which of those perhaps can happen at a lesser cadence, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think really it is meeting time, and a large portion of that would be the one-on-one type of meetings.
Any other surprises beyond meetings?
um
You or Tom?
Yeah, um, I think the um, the value of putting effort into working with people as individuals. Even if you had 3 people in the same role, the to move, to have them each work more effectively, to have them grow, to have them be able to rise up into another position further up on the ladder themselves, you know um, required a lot of customization, that you weren't going to gather them all in the room and teach them, but rather spend time with them and listen to them, and work to help them get recognize their own strengths, and to, be aware of the areas that they needed to be able to go improve in. That, like Artie, I worked with a machete as much as possible to, work on, making time in my calendar for other things. But, the payback on investment in one-on-ones was always very, very high. And I, went out of my way to try to avoid having to, skip a one-on-one, if at all possible.
Yeah, it's very insightful to see that Tom and I seem to be fairly aligned in the surprises we had in our transition, because the exact thing that came to my head when you asked that question again, Jeremy, is when I transitioned to leadership, I also realized how I really need to custom tailor every conversation and meeting to the individual I'm talking to. Prior to that, all I had in sight in a large way was me and my conversations with my leaders, right? But now, as a leader, I was talking to a broad set of stakeholders, and even, let's say, within my own team, no two conversations can be tailored exactly the same. You know, even if you're listening, the type of things one person wants to talk and raise could be very different from what the other one wants to. The kind of coaching they need, the kind of empowerment they need, the way they. So it's you cannot have a cookie cutter approach. So you have to have that mental sharpness as you're transitioning from one meeting to another, even if they're all seemingly one-on-one meetings, right? So that to me was a big it was an insightful learning.
Yeah, and I'll say that, one trick that you learn on the, the path from apprentice to master is that you make hour meetings 50 minutes long and you make half-hour meetings 25 minutes long. That, leaving aside the, the days when you had to move through a building in order to do things, that, there's nothing, written in stone anywhere that says an hour meeting needs to take up 60 minutes.
Yeah, and Artie. Oh, go ahead, Artie.
No, all I was going to say is the moving across buildings days are kind of coming back.
Yeah, seems like they are. Artie, you kind of touched on this. You talked a little bit about the balance of leadership and execution as one of those kind of challenges you have to tackle. And I'd say, for myself, I think one of the surprises along the way was understanding understanding the importance of delegation, and that you can always delegate more than you realize. And it's not just for you. It's not just giving it to someone else or throwing it over a fence, but it's also it's a part of that mentoring process of helping other people grow and develop those skills. And that combined with the avoiding perfection, just because you might know you might think, I'll stress that, you might think you know the right way to do something or the perfect way to do it. It doesn't mean that's necessarily the right way, or in the long run, it's not. It's better to have someone else take a stab at it and develop that skill set, even whether it's less ideal or maybe discovers a new path that you couldn't think of. So I think for myself, it was understanding the importance of delegation, and then also just always pushing to find more ways of delegating more in a way that's really also empowering to your team that you're working with. Anything else that either of you wanted to add on this topic of the transition from IC to leadership that you think people might find valuable?
Yeah, I think the one other element in this that I think is important, and it's also situational, it's going to vary every time, is how you build the relationship with your manager and with their manager. That we did talk about trust a little bit along the way. One of the keys to succeeding as a leader is to have the trust of the management team above you, in this. And, you're going to get there through, communication. You're going to get there through, explaining how you came to decisions. You're going to get there through execution, but that's something that you have to do consciously and not just assume that it's going to happen organically.
We've got 2 questions that have come in from the audience. So the first one, I'll direct this one to you, Artie. How would you recommend using metrics, KPIs to measure a leader's ability to up-level their teams? So, Tom, feel free to jump on that one too. But go ahead, Artie.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I look at KPIs, metrics as a good, beacon guiding thing for us to be working towards. But I don't necessarily think that that they, when you're talking about people up leveling and you're talking about deliverables and outcomes, there's things that are happening, there's dynamism, there's changes that are happening, so we have to be willing to look at those numbers in that light as well. Yes, certainly you set yourself some goals, and in these days of data driven, number driven pursuance, you are looking for those to indicate if you are heading in the right direction. But I also think that sometimes things happen, changes need to be made, and I don't necessarily hold myself extremely rigidly to that, as long as I have the rationale and the reasons to validate why there may be deviations.
Tom?
Yeah, I just add that there are benefits to having metrics, but the art of leadership is recognizing what those can be used to tell you and what's missing from them. So, to illustrate, you have 2 product support people working for you. One supports the mobile client, which has 5 features in it, and the other supports the heavily customizable server, which you stop counting on features after it got to 10,000. You can't measure the time it takes each of them to respond to a question equally. And you have to, I'm exaggerating to make the example, but as a leader, you've got to be able to go and understand, the data is only taking you to a certain point.
I'd say for myself, in response to that answer, or in response to that question, I very fundamentally, I believe in having very quantifiable roles, tiers on a career ladder, and you should be able to provide feedback to folks. And so, one of your first metrics is what percent of coverage are people doing with respect to what the expectations of their role at that level, whether they're a manager, director, senior director, VP, et cetera. What percentage of coverage are you seeing? Is that improving? Are you seeing your team's skill set improving? And also, I look at managers. A core skill, a core requirement. That's the better way to say it. Core requirement, I think, for managers is to help develop the careers and the careers and career opportunities for the people on their team, and in turn that means helping them either kind of move up or transition into, whether move up in the ladder on that in their current role, or transition into a different type of role, help them move on that path. but I would say some of those KPIs I'd be looking at would be, are you seeing people have better coverage of the expectations for their role in the ladder? Are you seeing people be able to move up the career ladder for those who want to be moving up that career ladder? And so I'd be looking at those types of metrics, and also make sure that those expectations are clear and quantifiable and kind of independently verifiable. So your traditional kind of smart metric, smart characteristics there.
I think,
go ahead,
I
Tom.
think, Jeremy, I think you should probably tag this as something that might be a future TPG live topic, because this alone, could cover an evening. But I'll just note that, I've been, second, third, level, manager along the way, and you do wind up, turning this downward. Whether this can be quantitative or whether it's qualitative, depends a lot on the organization. Quantitative is a lot easier when you can have, many people who fit into a category, and you can establish a ladder for it. If you have 400 customer support people, then it's a lot easier to go and define metrics for it than if you have a single person who does customer success for mid-size accounts. Then what you're going to be doing in order to grow them is going to be much more qualitative, because you just lack a useful metrics framework. I'm sure you can go buy one. There's always some somebody who will sell you one, but it's really so situational that it's at that level of leadership, it's to be able to work with the first level manager and help them build that framework and that plan in order to help the individual to grow.
Another question we've got is, how do you balance giving answers to your reports versus letting them figure it out? Artie, I see a big smile, so I'm going to go to you.
That's interesting. And I wish I could say, I wish I could give one answer that fits all. But as I said earlier, it really depends, right? Most of the time, as a good leader, my endeavor is to be able to empower my team, to allow them to ask the questions where they need unblocking and unblock them with that, right? Ideally, I steer away from, the do this, do that, because, my way of doing might be very different from the individual style. And, I want to empower. I think that is important for them to grow in whatever they are doing. However, there are times when you have to do that deeper level of, discussion, brainstorming, whatever, because truly maybe an individual is stuck. Now, this doesn't need to be just, you with that individual. Maybe there's a team that you're working with. And at that point, maybe the discussion could go along the direction of do this, do that. And sometimes, again, as I said earlier, the need of the hour needs that decision, to say, okay, we need to do this and we need to move forward. Here's why. Maybe there is a time crunch. Maybe this customer, I don't know, maybe there is a very sensitive, situation in the customer, and we need to do something to unblock ourselves, and we cannot be caught in that analysis paralysis situation. So it's not an ideal do this type of an answer. It depends. But typically, my endeavor is, listen to the individual, guide them, empower them, unblock them if they are stuck, but kind of let them figure out, their path.
Yeah, I second Artie on that. I think my general style has been to structure the dialogue with, okay, tell me about the problem that we have. Tell me about what you've considered doing in order to be able to solve that problem, and coach them through coming to an answer that's going to work for them, rather than to jump ahead and tell them what I think they should do in that case. Now, doesn't work all the time. There are times that they just don't have the skill. Was working with a new manager a couple of years ago who had a high performing employee with some real personality issues. And my new manager was just really struggling with that. She had never been a manager before, and she'd never dealt with a human being like this, where she needed to be able to try to go and solve the problem. So, we moved out of where, the type of dialogue that I would prefer to have, into one where, I talked about some of my experiences and how they shaped the way that I would go and do this. Still trying to avoid saying, this is what you should do with them. But to Artie's point, there's a customer issue, customer's angry, customer's, system isn't running. There are times you have to go and shortcut that too. You have to give up the opportunity to grow the manager in order to be able to take care of a higher goal, which is to make sure that the customer knows that they can trust your company.
All right, so we're going to wrap up our first topic of the show right there. And if you hear that sound, you know what that means. That means it's a trivia part of our show. And so the trivia is, what is the popular term that refers to products that remove pain points or steps that could frustrate or slow down the user? Once again, what is the popular term that refers to products that remove pain points or steps that could frustrate or slow down the user? Now, don't post the answer in the comments. Don't say the answer in the room here, but think about it amongst your friends, and we'll get to the answer a little bit later in the show. But it's definitely food for thought right there before we get into our next topic here. And our next topic is about establishing a product management organization. Maybe you have maybe it's about fixing a product management organization, or it might be more about actually building that first product management function that in an organization where it hasn't existed before. So let me, Tom, I want to go to you for this question, in that for organizations unfamiliar with product management, so we're talking about building a product management function where it has never existed before or never existed in any kind of formal way. For organizations unfamiliar with product management, how do you explain its core value?
Well, I'll break it up into two parts. And from experience, there are the situations where people are there and they want to understand how you're going to help, and then there are the hostile situations where your being there is going to change the dynamics of the organization, and the ability to drive the path of the product is going to be taken away from somebody else who isn't a product manager. So let's start with the easy one. I'll leave it to you, Jeremy, to decide if we come back to the hostile. In the case that you are the first product person on the ground in an organization that didn't have a product manager in it before, I think it's, in some ways, that's a gift, because you have an opportunity on that first pass through to go and define the scope of the role in a more pure fashion. That where product really sits in the space to be able to listen to and synthesize the inputs from the customers and users. And I distinguish the two because I spent my time in the enterprise, and the people who buy are not the people who use. But you have the opportunity to listen to them and listen to the other stakeholders in this, and then from that work with the technical team to take everything that they dream about and what is feasible at this time, and work that back into something that is going to go and provide business success.
So I don't I think in a lot of places, even where it's not quote unquote hostile, as you put it, I think just change, uncertainty, lack of clarity around kind of the overlap between different roles can kind of create a feeling of hostility. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you. I think taken to the next level, you're talking with each of your peers, each of the stakeholders in this, and drawing how the scope of your role, what you're going to make decisions for, the scope of their role and what they're going to make decisions for, where you're bringing in a set of skills or expertise that are going to assist, and where you're counting on them. I parachuted into domains where I had no experience. Immunization of children. At the time, I was still single. So, I only knew from the parents around me that the kids had gotten their shots, and they generally didn't like getting poked with a needle. So, you're going to have to rely on others in it. And so, it's an opportunity for all of you to start with a clean sheet of paper, a clean whiteboard, and go and talk about, why you're there, what value you're going to bring, and how all of you are going to work together to get to the desired land.
Artie, what have you found to be the most effective way to communicate a product management capabilities impact on business outcomes, customer satisfaction, other?
Yeah, I think to me, the answer to that lies in the intersect between solving for what your customer wants, aligning that with the business goals, and wanting to scale your organization, your business along the way, right? And I think that intersect is kind of the value that product management brings, because you know you want to be doing the right things, right? Whether customer driven or strategically driven, market driven, whatever that be, as aligned by the business goals. And if you want to just be a churn machine, we talked about outcomes versus just task oriented deliverables, right? If you want to be a churn machine, just responding to escalations, doing something because you're getting asked for it, then you're not going to be able to scale and grow your product, your use cases, or whatever that be. So really, I think the strong value that PMs bring is that synthesizing, is that prioritization, is that analysis, is that is defining the roadmap that provides a reasonable balance. I use the word reasonable balance because there's deviations that need to happen in real life, right? But that provides that reasonable balance between what is it that you want to do tactically, strategically, for your customers and for your organizational goals.
So playing devil's advocate, I'm joining an organization that's never had product before. I just heard you saying figuring out what features to do, what the priority should be, and so I'm the tech lead. We already do that. We figured out what we needed to do. We know what the strategies are. I've got a prioritized backlog that everyone's working on.
Is that truly what bulk of your customers are asking? Customers often say things without truly knowing. Are we spending that discovery time? Often I find that a product manager also plays the role of guiding the customers in terms of, say, what the market trends are, the product capabilities, maybe even the competitive capabilities and things like that. Customers, you know so the savvy mature customers probably know what they want. They know the problems that they're facing, but what they're asking you isn't always mapping to the problem that they want solved. There is a disconnect, and you have to spend that discovery time to really figure out what is it that they actually want solved. Often I have been at the seat of, I hear what the customer wants, and if I just blindly went and built that, that's not still necessarily going to solve the problem. But if I took the time and the effort to understand the problem, to understand that, hey, it's not just customer A, but customer B and C and D, and that's the pattern. Hey, this is the problem that we really need to solve. Then, I'm able to invest that resource, to do the right things and to benefit that broad set of customers. I think as an engineer, let's say if you have a tech lead, of an engineering organization, chances are they are pretty swamped in doing a lot of engineering things that they should be doing, building things. I don't know if all of this is happening, right? And again, that's why I also brought in the scale, because it also depends on the maturity of the organization. Sometimes in a very early stage, enterprise company, that may suffice, but as you start scaling and growing, the value of that becomes extremely immense.
Tom, your 2 cents.
Yeah, I think Artie and I are pretty aligned on this. But to the scenario you created, I would point out to the technical lead, first that we had just been out last night, and over beers, they were complaining about the number of conversations that they're asked to have with customers when the customers don't really know what they want anyway. So, I can go and I can insulate them from that.
So I guess maybe let me phrase the question a little bit differently. So in companies where they are questioning the need for product management, and we've seen it in some popular companies around. In companies that question the need for product management or see it as unnecessary, how do you handle that skepticism and demonstrate the tangible benefits a product management function, of product management capability brings to the organization?
Where I have landed, I have been brought in because there's someone further up the ladder who has a set of problems that they want solved, and they don't see the existing leadership team across all the disciplines to be able to do that themselves. That they're creating a product role to go and fill a gap. Now, in that sense, you've already sold the most important person, the person who has hired you, the person who is paying you in this, and it's now a dialogue with your peers. But I'm going to cut to the chase. Your peers have already lost because you've already been hired in all of this. Now now it comes down to, how quickly can you move through the storming phase of the relationship in order to get to a point that you're going to all be able to work together. In one case, there was, a founder who had left, who had ostensibly been doing the product stuff, but it was basically, what did he think would go and sell? He was gone. Now you have, the leadership team around, and, the head of the technical team is happy to keep building really cool technology. And if it doesn't sell, that must be because the salespeople are stupid.
Artie, yeah, go ahead, Artie.
Yeah, if I could add, again, if these roles are morphing into, other types of roles, that's a different story. But the point I want to highlight is a product person plays an important liaison glue between multiple stakeholders, right? It's not just about getting the requirements, building it into the product. It's about making sure that the documentation or the collateral is adequate, and helping there as needed. I've done that many times, and that's your marketing function, working with, let's say, the field, the SEs and the sales, to enable them, because the product has been built, you've been part of the building process, helping enable them to sell, the product, messaging and all of that. Working closely with stakeholders like support teams, again, to enable them, and all of that. So there's a liaison role that product managers are playing. Now, my view is that it doesn't matter what the function is called, but you need somebody to play that. And if you don't do a good job in one or the other of these areas, and there are more, by the way, right? I haven't mentioned pricing, packaging. I haven't mentioned customer related things, many other things. But if you don't have that liaison, I see balls getting dropped. Again, that's kind of where I brought in the scale. And what I truly probably meant by scale is, as you go along that maturity journey, these things become extremely important. I've been part of organizations where, customers ask about, the enterprise maturity. And these are the things that start standing out. In early phases, it may not matter if your documentation isn't great. It may not matter if your collateral is okay. But as you're maturing in your journey, which you want to as a growing organization, that stakeholder role becomes super important.
Yeah. If we had a whiteboard function in this live stream, I'd get up and grab the pen and not give it back to anybody, and I'd draw product management as the hub inside all of these other, inside work and working with all of the other organizations that, go from, the reason for existence for the company to, putting product and services out for the customer in this. And in some cases, there are many lines going between, product and sales or product and marketing. And in other cases, there are fewer lines going with finance or, going with some of the other entities. But it does bring together in one place the ability to look at this holistically, to make, you introduced me, as an engineer, to make decisions that have many variables in them and have many constraints. Pushing an extra feature into the next release in order to be able to close a deal is going to have an impact someplace else. And at the end of the day, the product manager is the one who needs to have that ledger and show, if we put this in, there's something else that comes out. And stop believing that development has extra capacity.
It's a funny thing when so I share the view of product management as kind of being that central hub. But it's a funny thing when you ask everyone in an organization to draw their role and explain their role and function. Marketing will draw themselves as the hub. Tech will draw themselves as the hub. Sales will draw themselves as the hub. Which kind of brings me to my kind of a follow-up question there.
Yeah, I'm gonna challenge that. I think there are very few sales or marketing people with the background to be able to draw that network diagram, much less put themselves in the center. They usually put themselves in the top corner and everything flows from them, but they don't see themselves as being the vehicle by which you make sure that it all gets done.
I think you'll a lot of different companies, but I think a lot of folks will. I think part of that challenge is people have a very different perspective, and I've got my own bias, and that, like I said, I see product as
no,
that center.
Our challenge in product is that if you bring 3 product managers into the room and you ask them to describe product management, you'll get at least 4 definitions.
Yep, unfortunately. Tom, what is the best way to demonstrate the immediate impact of the product management function in an organization where product management hasn't been a priority before?
I mean, it is situationally for me, it's usually been, moving from, chaos into order, to go from, a product release stream that, is random. It looks like a drunk walking down the street into a predictable cadence. That's the product centric view. There are other manifestations of it, like the marketing team, having enough time to prepare for what's going to be in the next release or what's not going to make the next release, because some salesperson came in with a deal and you had to go and adjust the ledger a week before you were feature frozen.
Artie, same question for you, and I want to, how do you get, what's a good first win? What's a first, quick results?
Yeah, to me, it's all about building the right things that demonstrate the value across your broad customer base, right? And doing this in that holistic fashion while you're interacting with the entire machinery, not just focused on, as Tom said, right, chaotic churn out of features. So I think that to me is a quick win.
What does it mean to not be, and I guess it's to both of you, what does it mean to not be churning out chaotic features? How does, so I'm sitting in one of the many other departments. How do I recognize the fact that we're not turning out so-called chaotic features, and as opposed to now the features that we are turning out?
So I can give you examples. Customer A asked for this. Customer A is a pretend $1 million account, and so we devote all resources to doing that, and that probably is, let's say it's a medium-sized feature, so it's taking some amount of your resources, versus there are, I don't know, say 30 customers that may not be each 1 million, but, and again, I'm just throwing numbers here, pretend they are 250K customers, but there are 30 customers, and the fact that 30 are asking for it is also demonstrating that there is a broader set of demand that exists with it. So again, that's what I meant by building those right things, making the call on, if I did this, This is the value it gives. It comes at the cost of not doing that. This is the opportunity cost. This is the risk. This is what we are walking away, a conscious decision, right? Versus just, all I'm doing is, hey, I have a $1 million customer, really creating noise about it, and that's what I'm building, right? So, we've seen this, and it doesn't mean we don't do this. There are conscious choices we make, but having the ability to make that conscious choice, provide, doing that analysis, the trade off, right? That's, I think, the biggest value that
Yeah.
But
PM
yeah,
brings.
go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say that, from, looking out the door, the releases are coming out in a predictable fashion. They come out, every 4 months. And, that's the cadence. Looking at it from the customer.
Well, I guess if you're saying every 4 months, but isn't that
Well,
just
so-
I have a good Scrum Master?
Well, you're going to need a lot of good people inside the organization in order to move to a repeatable process. The Scrum Master is one element, but there's a lot of traffic management to do in order to build up that cadence. But the other side of predictability is when a salesperson comes in and says, I'm working to be able to go and renew an account, and the customer has these 3 bugs. Can you tell me when they're going to be fixed? It's not only to be able to, assign them to releases, but to have the salesperson walk away saying, with the track record that the team has, I'm confident I'm not going to have to use, language in the contract to say, well, maybe you'll get this stuff by a particular point. I can be confident that this is a repeatable process that I can rely on and the customer can rely on.
So I want to push back a little bit there. You've been talking a lot about process in that response. Like, to me, velocity is not a domain of product a KPI of product management that I would point to as some indicative of success or not. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but
Yeah,
I
think
it sounds like predictable velocity is to me the domain of project management and Scrum Masters.
I think that, under the hood, yes. But if if the product manager is the one who's out there publicly, talking about the roadmap, talking about the priorities of the organizations and the commitments that are being made, at least in, the enterprise software space where I've worked, customers want to know when, the Caribou release is going to be available. It's they don't want to look at one of those roadmap diagrams with no dates on it. They're counting on particular features in there, and they want to know when. And if you want, as a product manager, the only way that I could do that was by making sure that my peers in the organization were able to build and execute that repeatable process. I didn't have to run it myself, but I did go and check in on it regularly to make sure that it was working before I went back out and talked to another customer or 3.
I think part of the predictability is also, commitments that we need to make, forward-looking commitments that we make, and making sure that those balls aren't dropped. And if they are, because again, reality, things need to change, the timeline shift, making sure that you go back and do the necessary communication and not just drop those things in a vacuum. And there again, the ability to push back and say no to other things that may come onto that same plate, right? And again, have that conversation of, hey, remember, we already have these things here, and you're adding more. That means something else got to give. So I think that's probably part of that predictability that Tom refers to as well. Because when you talk about something, releases, uh, going out at whatever specific cadence, a release consists of multiple things. It has features, it has commitments, or you're also saying, hey, these bugs will get fixed in this release or in the patch or whatever. But tracking that as a package, right, making sure that awareness is rests with the right stakeholders who are depending on those things, right? Could be the sales folks, could be marketing for some marketing event announcement, whatever it be. But I think that's part of the predictability as well that Tom highlights.
Yeah, I think Jordan Bergstrom has a good answer for the how to demonstrating a lot of that value of product management, and I'll just quote him in that it's to become market experts. To become market experts who define what problems the product needs and to solve them for the customers, and I'll just elaborate it, showing what are those as in that product role, what are the problems we want to solve, what are the market demands that are out there, even more importantly than the features, because who knows what features you need to do to solve those problems. It's about iterating and trying new things until you move the needle on solving problem X. Tom, when starting building a new product management capability in an organization from scratch, what are the first critical steps that you've seen that were helpful to take to ensure long-term success?
So to answer this, let me say that I'm not talking about arriving day one where you're there to start to sketch out what we're going to build. Rather, you have a development organization already, and something has already been delivered, and you're moving forward. In that context, it's going to sound similar to before, but you need to understand what you have. Whether that's going in and understanding the backlog, whether it's understanding the commitments that have already been made, new to the organization, understanding the product, understanding the problems that you're solving for customers, which hat tip to Jordan. It ultimately comes down to all of that. What's already there, and what are you going to have to go and put into place so that I think I used it in one of the threads of conversation we had. You initially start out as a full stack product manager. I steal that full stack thing from developers who say, yeah, I do everything from, the UI down to the server, the networking, all of it. Well, they said, you're the only product manager in there, then you're probably full stack. You're going to have to do a little bit of a lot of things. And to a question that came earlier from Dina, on any given day, you're going to have to decide, which three balls am I going to keep in the air today, and which ones am I going to let drop for today. So it's developing that very early framework for how are you going to make decisions and how are you going to be able to prioritize in this. Over time, there are many patterns for product management. You go from the roadmap diagram that the head of development drew on their whiteboard and that you took a picture of into something that's concrete and readable, and that you can commit to. you can be accountable for, and you can go and you can assign accountability to, the other members of the organization who need to work with you in order to be able to go and execute against the roadmap. That's going to happen over time. Again, 100 days would be fantastic. Or, you've gone in there and you've suited up and you're fighting the fire that first afternoon.
Artie, how do you effectively integrate a new product management function into an organization where they already have well-established structures and processes?
If they have well-established structures and practices, I take it, this is a fairly mature organization, and they have the ball rolling already in some ways. Here it is about perhaps taking it to that next level, whatever that next level may mean, right? Because I've been in organizations where there is a reasonably mature product management practice, but now you can really take the product management craft to the next level. You can
Well, I'm talking about an organization that doesn't have a product management function, but they've got a lot of structure and a lot of process already.
Got it. Thanks. I think if that's the case, I think I go back to the things that Tom said, right? You have to start off with starting to do a little bit of everything from a full stack PM standpoint, and slowly build in, assimilate those processes, right? The cross functional stakeholder communication channels, the processes and tools. And here again, often PM may need to wear the hat of the other PM, which is project manager, right? But start bringing in the product management type of tools to help clearer and more accountable tracking. Start building, as I said, those cross-functional communication processes with the various stakeholders, and slowly start bringing in that maybe a more method to the madness around the capabilities that are being released into the product.
We have a question that came in from Giselle. It's related, I guess, as far as I'll shoehorn it in to be related. It's related as far as building that product culture. What are the roles that you're building in that product management organization? And so Giselle is asking, I've noticed that some responsibilities seem to overlap between a product owner and a product manager. Can you clarify how you see the difference between these two roles? Tom, I'll go to you, and I'll save my answer for after you two.
Yeah, I think I've seen some variation in organizations, but in general, I've used product owners to embed more closely into a development team, and to provide continuous loop of information, both going in terms of requirements, customer usage, information from the field, and on the outbound side, to make sure that we're well aware of what it's taking in order to build the things that we believe we're being steered to, because development has finite capacity and limitations in terms of what they're going to be able to accomplish with the platform that we've already given them and the tools that they're working with, and they're not going to be able to overcome the speed of light, no matter how fast their laptops are, and to make sure that we've got that. And then the product manager, sits over a set of product owners and tries to, bring that all together and do more of the, engagement outside of the technology teams into the rest of the organization.
Artie?
Yeah, the way I've heard it being referred to, and again, there is variability across different places that I've been, but in the simplest way that I like to distill it is inbound versus outbound product manager. And a product owner largely is a very inbound product manager. Inbound here meaning embedded very closely with the product development and execution aspect of it, right? The roadmap building, the planning, the tracking, the being part of the engineering ceremonies and working super closely with engineering as that capability is built out, right? Versus outbound product manager is the GTM aspects, right? So that can be really out there talking to customers, working closely with the field, maybe business development stakeholders, understanding what's being asked, working with perhaps marketing, or if that rests within product management on the pricing and packaging aspects of things. But really, the outward facing aspects of product management. So in the simplest sense, that's how I kind of have seen it being defined. And I think largely wherever I've seen the product owner type of titles, I've seen it map fairly reasonably to this. In some cases, I've also seen technical product management. That's another, so I think that also kind of fairly maps to product owner, where your ability to work super closely with engineering is really the prime aspect of your role and responsibility. And in the latter case, it's more the GTM aspects. I think the converse of this is you being a full stack PM, where you're kind of doing the end to end of the whole thing.
It's interesting. Some of what I've been seeing, looking around this year, is that if you look at product management organizations that are internal within an enterprise, product owner is usually more lined up with somebody on the business side, and product management is in the organization that builds and delivers stuff. They're owner and management are swapped in terms of where they go and they sit in the ladder. From a capitalist perspective, I'd say more so that the owner goes and sits on top of what the managers are doing. But I think going back to what I said at the beginning, we're in a field that is evolving, and different organizations are trying to figure out how to make this work for them. There isn't a single definition for any of these roles, and the organizations that are doing without them, they're probably not doing without the functions, at least not the ones that I've looked at. Rather, they've mapped those functions into other roles, but they've now made those roles something that's different for them than it might be in another organization that did have product managers.
So I've had a grin on the whole time, and I've been looking at Jordan's comments, and I knew Jordan would be commenting. Jordan's someone I've known for quite some time, and this is a topic that we've actually debated. So that's why when I saw Giselle post the question, I was eagerly awaiting Jordan's comments. The product manager and product owner, there should not be a distinction, is what I will say. The field of product management made a wrong turn not too long ago by creating this wrong turn, a misunderstanding, a devolution, you might say, not too long ago when they came up with product owner as a separate role from a product manager, separating kind of this strategic thinking from a lot of the activities and the action. This throwing it over a wall really creates, I think, a very fractured way of approaching product management that can't be helpful in the long run. I think product owner, when you think about it in the context of the agile framework, I think it's best to think of it not as a role, but as certain skills and responsibilities that a product manager can do. In an organization where they're calling people product managers or product owners, they're best used interchangeably. If you can be a product owner, but you're doing the work of product management, if you want to kind of use some of the more agile terminology.
I think
what Jordan said, I'm not wrong. Whoa, wait.
Okay. Well, you're going to want to save this recording.
So I'd say it's I think I saw an article recently where someone had further elaborated on what I've been saying with the product owner product manager skill set. It's to separate them and to create that bifurcation within product management. Where I've seen it, where they have been these two different roles, has been a real wrong turn, wrong step in a lot of organizations. That I think, as you see a lot of the pushback of just the agile framework, I think that's just yet another one of the symptoms, maybe, of this kind of. I'm trying to find. PG words. This twisting of what agile could have been or should have been, and what's kind of evolved today. Tom, you were saying?
Yeah. So I've been involved on the agile side as a development manager almost since the manifesto was written, and I knew half the people who signed the manifesto at the time, and where agile is today is not what was envisioned. But I say that as a gray-haired guy. I think what we're getting into here is that many organizations are challenged figuring out how to scale product management, and to in scaling, not diminish its benefit when running at a higher level. When you move from trying to do management of a single product to be managing a family of product, or manage a set of products that come together in a platform, there's a lot. The better organizations are experimenting, and the other ones are falling back on 19th century management styles of let's just create hierarchies somewhere there can be a king.
Yep. What are, Artie, to you, what are some of the common pitfalls when integrating a product management function into an established organization that could be avoided? And how do you how can they be avoided, I should say?
Yeah, I think often I've seen one of the biggest pitfalls being starting to leverage processes and frameworks way too soon and way too early in the game. I think processes, frameworks are important, but you don't want to do it to impede the agility and the velocity. You want to do it to aid or supplement or accelerate that agility and velocity. And that's one of the big downsides I've seen when product managers try to come in and try to adopt a very scientific view to things, scientific, academic, whatever you might want to say, and start layering prescribed notions of framework and processes. And I think so these things need to happen in a more organic fashion and tailored in a way that they fit the needs of the business, the BU and things like that. So that's one of the common pitfalls I've definitely seen from a product management angle.
Tom, what are some of those common pitfalls that you've seen and advice for avoiding them?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Artie stresses, I think the other element here is recognizing that the um, you know the success of product management comes from its ability to be able to go and keep that ledger and along the way, and that comes from what we talked about earlier, which is having the trust, the confidence of the management team above you, that if you've been parachuted in to go and start out product management along the way, yes, you've got to move, you got to move quickly, but you're not looking, you want just enough process and just enough tool to go and get you through things along the way. But ultimately, you got to tie that back to, what are the expectations of how this is going to change with a product, product management function now, dropped in the middle of what we already have. We're now paying for these additional people. They're not out selling anything directly. What are the benefits that they're bringing to the business and the customers? And you ultimately have to stay aligned with that.
Yeah, I would add one other pitfall for people to look out for is don't move too fast. Don't try to don't go too big, especially when you're starting out. You need to build on the successes. You need to get that flywheel spinning, and you need to not just you know that the importance of product management, but everyone else needs to really be bought in on it. And I don't mean just at a high level. You need to demonstrate the value, which means looking for those early wins, building on them, and growing it. With that top-down support, but really growing it and building it to the point where you're not pushing product management; it's being pulled into all the other parts of the organization, where everyone wants to understand what it means to have that product mindset, to have that product thinking. So that's I think that would be the chief pitfall I would want to highlight there. We're gonna transition to our next part of the show, which if you're hearing music playing, it can only mean one thing, which is it's time for the trivia answer part of the show. So just as a reminder, the question is, what is a popular term that refers to products that remove pain points or steps that could frustrate or slow down the user? Once again, what is a popular term that refers to products that remove pain points or steps that could frustrate or slow down the user? And yes, I did go a little bit easier this time than last month, so hopefully this is a little bit more of a doable question. Artie, you want to take a stab at the answer?
Not quite sure.
Popular term that refers to products that remove pain points or steps that could frustrate or slow down the user. Tom, do you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, the way you have this written, I don't see an obvious answer to it either. So if you thought you were making it simpler, you weren't thinking of Artie and I.
Oh man.
Maybe this is the pitfall you were referring to, Jeremy.
Yeah, trivia. Product management trivia. Be careful. I'm gonna have to keep working on it. So Apple emphasizes this in their user interfaces, aiming to make complex technology accessible and easy to use. Amazon famously streamlined purchasing with its one-click ordering system, removing unnecessary steps, creating a speedy checkout experience. They both created frictionless, the answer, experiences. Frictionless has become a key term for everything about a product: onboarding, customer interactions, feature usage. Frictionless is understood to emphasize simplicity, efficiency, user centricity, aiming to make technology more accessible, intuitive. One thing I'd like to point out, though, is to not confuse frictionless with better. Sometimes a little bit of friction, for thinking, could be a positive thing. Frictionless on one half of a user experience with maybe high friction on another half can create a very negative experience. Something to think about. Maybe you've seen a lot of this controversy in the news with Adobe, for example, with respect to it's so easy to subscribe, but yeah, good luck if you ever want to cancel that subscription. So frictionless was the answer we were looking for, and man, I keep stumping people, so I'm gonna have to work harder on my trivia questions, or maybe the wording of the question is where I need to look deeper on into myself there. So with that said, as we kind of start to wrap up the show, if assuming neither of you have anything you wanted to add on my frictionless question there, which was apparently high in friction. Artie, you were saying?
Yeah, I heard of frictionless experiences. I think what stumped me there was, what do you call those products? And that's what stumped me.
Gotcha. So, so let's go into final comments. Artie, do you have any final comments for us today?
No, except, I thoroughly enjoyed all the insightful questions, and, whatever I shared is based on my experience, my understanding. And I said, this is a learning journey. So ultimately, everybody needs to map it to their experiences, their situations, and their own journeys. And, again, remember, you're not alone. So,
Tom, final comments.
Yeah. So, I think while we hit on the concept a lot in the last hour and three quarters, I want to stress, ultimately product management is a collaborative function. And, to, succeed as you shift into being a first level manager, we face somebody as a first level, product manager with responsibility. It is, don't take your eye off of opportunities to go and collaborate. I think the other thing that I'll mention is, it's been a long time since I was a line manager. I've spent a lot more time, further up the hierarchy. But whenever I move somebody into a management job, I would give them a copy of a book called Managing Humans by Michael Lopp. He's also known as Rands in Repose, and he's been out in Silicon Valley for 20-something years. He has worked for a whole bunch of companies that you would recognize, from Netscape. Well, actually Borland, I think, in the beginning, and he's at Apple today. But across about 30 articles, he pulls together a lot of things that a first level or a second level manager should really go and think about. So, if you haven't heard of it, and it's these management topics sound interesting to you, then go and find it in the library, look for it online, buy a copy in the bookstore, and go and enjoy it over a couple cups of coffee.
Awesome. Thank you. And I want to thank everyone off camera roundtable, you might say. Great questions, great engagement, great comments, great perspectives I've seen shared throughout this. It's really, your participation was really what makes TPG Live unique, and just makes it just a fun all-around experience. And a really special thanks to our roundtable, Artie, Iyengar, Senior Director at Vesa, and Tom O'Rourke. Both of you were awesome. I think people have got a lot of interesting perspectives from both of you, and just in highlight and just from our topics, moving beyond the IC role, introducing product. Everything from transitioning from your day-to-day execution to broader goals, guiding teams, overcoming that skepticism and avoiding maybe some of those common pitfalls along the way. And really, whether you're an engineer, new product manager, really any kind of product role, product adjacent role, it's your thoughts, your questions, and your stories that really make these conversations what they are. We'd love to see you on screen as part of our on-screen roundtable. If you'd like to join us or explore joining us, just shoot me a message at jhorn, that's JHORN, at theproductguy.com. And we can take that conversation from there. And also, there's so many more topics we have to cover. Tom highlighted a few, Artie highlighted a few that we might be covering in future TPG lives. Let me know in the comments below what you'd like us to discuss in future episodes. And also, I want to end with, I've got a quick favor to ask everyone. If you're enjoying today's conversation, please hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and if you can, tell 5 of your friends, five product people, whether they're aspirational or in leadership, about the TPG Live podcast that we've got here today, the Product Way channel, where we've got a lot of this kind of content and a lot of other great content that's always coming out. It would really mean a lot to me. It would really mean a lot to the channel. It'd really help us grow in all the right sort of ways. And just in final, thank you, everyone, and I'll see you all next time on TPG Live.
Thank you.